Hey there YouTube, it's Petey Two Finger, and I'm here with the Stereo Magic. So this is it's a spring reverb device. Pretty cool, huh? This harkens back to the day when in your automobile you didn't have a stereo, you had a mono. So it was just an AM radio that has single speaker in the dash. So you would buy this, mount this under the dash, clip your speaker wire. You would take the speaker wire coming out of the radio and plug it into this yellow wire, which leaves you with two additional black wire outputs. One you would wire to the front speaker, and then you would add a secondary speaker in the back and run your own wire to the rear speaker. So what this does, you can see it has this mechanical bypass switch here. When you pull this knob, it turns the reverb on or off. And you can also adjust the amount of signal that goes to the front or the rear. Which, trust me, if you have signal going through, you can hear this thing doing its thing. So you can kind of send the amount, you can vaguely adjust the amount of reverb versus straight signal that you want with this adjuster. Now, it is a single spring, whereas most spring reverb units have 2 or 3 springs for a much fuller sound. This is an Automotive unit. It's a little different. I've got the screws out of the back. The unit is not fastened. You can see there is 4 contact points. So there's an input and an output on this springboard here. So it's probably negative, positive, positive, negative, in and out. And there's two transducers, which means this one here is vibrating the spring, and then this one here is receiving that vibration. And there typically is 2 power stages, 2 amplification stages to make that happen. Now there's a single 2N2 712 2712 silicon PNP transistor here, and then on the bottom we have this power transistor, because this is powering speakers. So it's got this is heat sink onto the chassis. This is going to get a little warm. It runs off of 12 volts. There's no ground wire. You're just supposed to ground it by connecting it to the chassis. We got this old, wonderful Nashville Electronics. Is that a paper and oil capacitor? And there's a trimmer pot here. I'm going to have to adjust that. I haven't played with that yet. As well as this audio transformer. So this thing was given to me. It's got a fusible input. It's just a gold mine. I don't exactly know. Well, I've got an idea what I'm going to do with it. Of course, I wanted to play guitar through it. So I've got that hooked up here. That's set to 100% front. You can hear that spring vibrating away. And we could do a little distortion. The thing is I gotta check these patches because most of them have reverb on them on this device that I'm the multi-effector. So I want to go through and make sure that I'm turning those reverbs down so we're not hearing the digital reverb. And man, that sounds good. That's that little spring reverb with the single spring. So yeah, this is that's too loud, and the cat's gonna be crying. Kita, do you want to be in the movie? So it's a neat little thing, and honestly, like I said, this thing it's a bit of an odd duck design. It's really a simple circuit. And can we get at this truth on here? Yeah, the screwdriver's, it's too fat. It's a really, really skinny. I've got some skinny screwdrivers up here. Let me see if we can adjust this. It looks like looks like they set it at the factory and it's never been adjusted, so it might not really want to move very. There we go. So this is biasing the transistor that is providing the amplification for this reverb stage. So when we knock it out of whack, nothing spectacular happens, just the reverb goes away. So I have it biased a little bit hotter than it. Now, you guys want to hear some music through it? I've got a MP3 player here, and it's just got my album from 2021. This album is called Semantical Nightmare, and So yeah, it's going. It's spring reverbing. And one of the things, like John Lord, who was the keyboard player from Deep Purple, he had a spring reverb unit mounted in his Hammond organ, and he used to pull it back. I think he had a hinge. So he could literally pull this organ and it would do a wheelie, and he would drop it. And it would come down. Again, I do not know how he had this, if it was spring loaded, like a Hammond organ is heavy, how he was able to pull this back, I still don't know how he did it. But he would wheelie this organ and then let it go, and it would fall and make that noise. Actually, with the distortion on it, and with the 3-spring unit, it's much more impressive. Now, they have a component, electrical component, which is called a solenoid. And this is like when you go to Grandma's house and you ring the old-timey doorbell, it'll go ding dong. And it'll actually be two bells up there. And what it is, it's a coil with a opposite pole magnet. So when you hit the button, it sends like 35 volts AC up there, and that lights up that electromagnetic field. And the magnet that's in the center of this coil is opposite pole. So it pushes it out and it hits the bell. It actually is a little hammer, ding, and then when you let go, there's a spring that pulls it back, dong, it hits the other bell. There's a bell on each side. So I was always thinking about getting a spring unit and getting a solenoid and having that, when you press it, it would come up and hit this, hit this spring and make that sound. I don't know where the ideal place to the most dramatic noise. This one here, it almost seems like it's really kind of loose, and like it looks like these are riveted in, but not easy to it would be easy to drill out. I just wouldn't want to break the spring. I mean, I'm thinking I'm going to take this thing apart, and it's got 4 connectors here, one for the input, one for the output. Unsolder those, hook this thing up to like a 3x3 amp, so that you have 1.5 watt amp on one side, or 3 watt amp on one side, 3 watt on the other, and see what can I pad that out with resistors and get this thing to sound good, or even distort. And then run it through a PT2399 Kuroki Echo, mod that out for long delay, and then put a power amp in it with a couple of speakers in some kind of a chassis with a button with the solenoid to hit this spring unit. Because as it is I'm going to gut this, I think. I think that's what I'm going to do with it. Unless somebody wants to offer me money for this and say, oh, I want that. I want this Stereo Magic as it is. I will sell it to you. I think I would sell it for $50 plus shipping. So maybe I will even put it up on eBay, because honestly, this spring reverb unit isn't performing as hot as I'd like it to. I'd rather have the $50 and be able to buy a regular spring tank, that has three spring units in it. And then I could take the solenoid and make a T-bar on it, so when it comes up, it hits all 3 springs. So, I mean, this is something I've had an idea to do for a long time. I ordered some parts that are coming, but I wanted to show you guys this thing today, because it's just kind of a weird artifact. There is another guy on YouTube who has a shorter video on the Stereo Magic. He didn't really go into too much detail. I will tell you that the positive and negative on the wires are not marked. Usually the wires are marked. They'll have a stripe on the negative. So how I figured that out was to put my multimeter on a continuity test, and this will let you trace things very easily. So you hook one end, take one probe, and you hook that up to the ground of the unit. So this is a chassis ground, so you can just clip it on anywhere. And then you go on these wires, and you'll hit one of them and it'll sing and the other wire won't. And the other wire that doesn't sing is the positive. So I merely marked them. All the wires that sing, make the noise, I put a little piece of this marker on it, blue marker, and that means it's negative. So once you got the polarities marked out, then it's like, well, this yellow wire is obviously input. And then the other two speaker wires, you can quickly figure out after hooking up a pair of speakers to it that the front one doesn't have the reverb signal and the rear one does. So as far as the speakers go, I tested this with 8 ohm speaker and with 4 ohm. And as you would guess, the unit does sound better with a 4 ohm speaker. That's because that's what it was designed to see, is an automotive speaker. So if you're thinking about running one of these at home, keep in mind you're going to need 4 ohm speakers for it. Or you can rewire one of your 8 ohm speakers for 4 ohms, which isn't too hard to do. But it'll run it, just won't run as efficiently, and it'll be half as loud with 8 ohm speakers. So again, if you want to play with something like this, and I have all the screws, I have the lid for it. The chassis is a little bent. I can bend that back. So if anybody's interested and you see this, and you really have to have a Magic Sound for your stereo setup, I will sell it, but it's gonna end up getting torn apart here fairly shortly because there's simply it's such an odd duct. Like, you know, in order to utilize this properly, you really need a mono radio. And the only time that you know, like this would be really cool if you had an old car radio, if you had an old mono radio like in your shop, in your garage, I would pay $50 for this. Are you kidding me? It's the coolest thing to have because then you can have reverb. You can mix your own amount of reverb in on the music. And I don't know, like you're probably not very familiar with that mix, that song that I played, but certain pieces, the frequencies, they resonate really well with that reverb unit, and it just sounds, it adds some overtones to the music, which is really really a neat effect. And I would definitely like if I had a garage and I had an old car radio that was mono, this is what I would use to get 2 speakers on it, because yeah, it's mono, but you've got spring reverb on it, and that's what makes it super cool. So I wanted to show that to you guys. I know probably nobody's going to be interested. I just want to give YouTube, give the world a shot at it before I gut the thing, because sometimes with older stuff, people will get really upset with you when you do what I'm going to do, which is just tear it apart for the components. But like I said, when I actually got in here and tested it, and I'm hearing what this single crash sounds like as opposed to what I know what a triple crash sounds like, I'm almost thinking I may have made a ill decision on buying a bunch of parts to make this thing. It's supposed to make a dramatic lightning thunder noise, you know, with just a single spring. So as the idea of making a crash, this isn't the best device, but for adding spring reverb to music, it's just the right amount because it's a single spring. It doesn't muddy up the music a real lot. And another thing I'll mention is this amplifier has a bass control on it, and that when you turn the bass up on it, it gets a little muddy. So when you're playing around with spring reverb, reverb tanks, stuff like this, it's one thing to keep in mind. A professional engineer will always reduce the bass frequencies on the reverb channel. And that just helps to muddy it up. Now, ultimately, having your own knob to control it, because that can sweeten up those artifacts and the harmonic effect that you're going to get these overtones and this new sound that's going to appear because of the reverb. That's a big word. You can kind of throttle that right in there on that bass knob. So it's cool to have a bass control. So if I were going to wire this up, you know, ultimately I would have that old radio, but I would want to have a 3-band EQ on it, like a bass guitar EQ. Like they sell these harnesses on eBay for $10 that have 3 knobs. They run on 9 volts, and you know, it's bass, mid-range, treble. It would work perfect for this. So that's how I would do it if I wanted to have a nice sweet setup for this. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please leave a comment. I'm going to be just trying to straighten this out with my vice grips, and then I'm going to clean up the front panel a little bit. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.